Welcome to the Fiffe Files. My name is Michelle Fiffe, cartoonist and creator of comics such as Copra, Zegas, Negativland, Panorama, tons of other stuff. But what we're doing here is examining the visual body of work of Giffen, who has drawn comics for many decades and has changed styles all throughout those years. And so what we're doing is we're taking a deep dive into his entire printed back matter. And this is the penultimate installment of a video series where, let's see, the first one started out with him working at Marvel Comics and a little bit for DC, and then taking a break for a couple years, and then coming back, for working mostly for DC, and then getting a gig working on Legion of Superheroes, which changed his fortune. Really, he became a fan favorite as a result. And that was the first episode around, we're covering years, the late 1970s, like 1978 to 1980. He took a break and then came back and worked till about 1982. And that's when a burnout happened. He just drew the Legion so intensely, he burnt out. So the second episode concentrates on his post-burnout, which he still worked on Legion, but he started playing around with experimental layouts and styles and really appropriating other styles in a deep way that got him into some sort of trouble. And then he had to change again. So we're talking about years 83 to 86. So we're going in chunks of about 3 years now, because then the next phase would be when he sparked the Justice League Bwahaha era with James DeMatteis and Kevin Maguire. And he learned a lot from that creative team. And he started spearheading crossovers at DC Comics, and it really reinvigorated his career and his standing, and which led to the fourth episode covering the reboot, the not the reboot, but the Legion of Superheroes 5 years later mega arc, in which Giffen was in charge of rebranding the entire franchise to mixed results. I personally think, and I unpack the reasons why I think it's his best work. It's his purest work. It's his most energetic and involved work. Whereas fandom at large either loved it or hated it. It really split the fandom, and it split his his fans' allegiance to him. But he moved forward, and because of that, and that's where we're at now. That's where we're at now. Because of that split, he started drifting into more independent work, and that's what we're going to be covering now. And by the way, this is a visual sort of mapping, right, of his work. What I mean by it's the peak Giffen, the 5 years later era, is that what he learned from all his years before, as a newbie, as a fan favorite, and then as just a pro, he applied everything he learned to this 5 years later initiative. And so, not completely divorced of influence, but it was the perfect version of him almost, not only visually, but thematically and in a workmanlike as well. Like, he was a team player. He assembled his creative team in a smart way, in an effective way. And so when that went off the rails after a couple years, that project met with a lot of resistance, I should add. And we covered that in the previous episode, in episode 4. For this 5th episode, we cover his change yet again in style, in which we saw a hint of that at the very end of his 5 years later run. And I want to take a look at it now in this Who's Who binder edition for the Heckler, which was another title that he sparked toward the end of his run at DC. Now, before he was marked by a Kirby influence, then a Jose Munoz influence, and then Kevin Maguire influence. And then he started just, he blended it all in, right? He blended it all into this one 5 years later project. And then by now, this is a much looser, ink-heavy drawing approach. Now, he cited R.O. Bleckman as an influence, which means he's just putting down the pen and drawing and not letting it up. He's just like going for it. He's also said about this style that he doesn't pencil. It's directly ink directly on the page. So that might explain the super organic crunchiness of these lines, and where perspective doesn't matter. It's all about mood, it's about feel, it's about just giving it a specific tone. And that is not really the first time you saw it. You saw it in the last issue of the Legion that he drew. He went from one style to the next in one single page. And you saw hints of it in this ad right here, this house ad. There's a little bit of that sort of improv type of line. But clearly this was drawn maybe, well, I don't know about clearly, but this is, for example, this right here is the cover for the first issue. That's already been drawn. I'm assuming the issue had already been drawn if it's already being publicized. And so maybe he's just introducing it right there in this. You could see it in the little forearm, in the legs, in the way these shoulders sort of are more angular than not. And in the rip of the page right here, the meta rip of the page. But in this Who's Who profile, you really see it. It's in full force. And there you go. Usually there's original art for these panels, but right now it's just a hand drawn ha-has. Then there's also this trading card. Let's see if you could take a look at it. And it's that style. I mean, notice the buildings, notice the scraggly pipes in the bottom, the organic smoke. Now, the very final thing he would do for DC though is this series, and not for DC, for this era of DC. We're going in chronological order of his published works, more or less, but this is pretty much that style. And it's interesting to note that off the bat, it's very rendered. It's very detailed. It's not quite as clear line as the Heckler piece suggests. And in fact, this reminds me more of a Simon Bisley influence. So he's probably going off of having worked with Simon on the Lobo material, and he's inserting this sort of fun. There's a playfulness to this. Like he's hand lettering this stuff, just goofy numbering on every page, just giving it a lot of character. And even the panel borders are hand drawn. I mean, it looks like fun stuff, and it does look like he's just going in there with the ink. He's not busting out a ruler or anything. He's just drawing this stuff. And it looks a little bit not over rendered, but rendered in that Simon Bisley way, where it's just he is drawing more veins and muscles when he can, lots of shadow, but he's kind of losing that as we go along, even in this issue. Right? So this is like about mid to late 92. That's when this is coming out. And so I'm sure he thought that this was just a fun, just mini series, and he could just experiment with this. Maybe he already had plans to just stick this out. He had been known to experiment a bunch, you know. When I mentioned earlier, the Kirby, the Munoz, the Maguire, those are broad strokes. In between all those things, he would experiment here and there, not only with style, but with form, with layouts, with plotting, just his whole approach. He was a sponge. Keith Giffen was. He was just applying all his influences, whether it be from old school pros or newbies like Maguire and Bisley. Like he worked closely with Bisley. I believe Bisley was doing Doom Patrol covers, but he was also doing the Lobo miniseries for Keith and Alan Grant, writer Alan Grant. What Keith would do is he would do layouts for a lot of this stuff. When I say he's collaborating with these artists, he would just plot the story with the writer, The writer would then script the dialogue, insert the jokes or whatever, and the artist would then have a layout from Keith. He would know exactly what to draw. And Simon Bisley drew the hell out of those pages. I mean, I would suggest you look them up, but they don't look quite like this. But I noticed that there's a sort of inventive, explosive application of ink. And if he's not penciling it, that's just that explains a bunch. I mean, it's also if you're inking your own work, also penciling it is a little redundant. I know there's an approach to doing that where you just pencil very loosely, almost like very very just basic shapes to give you an idea of what to draw, and then you really draw when you're inking. And I'm sure that's what he did here. I mean, I'm sure he just didn't even pencil at all, um, by his own admission. So this is it. This is the final issue of this Lobo Infanticide issue miniseries. And again, this is sort of an ambush bug approach of just injecting a different style into the overall narrative, just to mess with people, just to have fun, just to kind of remind everyone that this is just that comics are just a fun distraction, but still super. I mean, super violent. And the fact that it's drawn in this way, it kind of lets it get away with it. You know, it's not like it's not it's gross in a different way. It's a cartoony grossness. I mean, by the way, these are just excellent visuals. I mean, and it's super chaotic. If it wasn't for the colors, even with the colors, you kind of have to work a little bit to figure out what's going on. But there's always little jokes everywhere. And this about wraps it up. You know, like I mentioned in the last episode, he left the Legion project in a huff. Not he was just super frustrated with the working conditions. And I don't know about a huff. That's maybe me projecting or you know just making it up. But that's the sense I got from what he said in interviews. And he was just fed up, so he left. And he left while drawing in this style. And where did he go? He went to Image. He went to Image Comics. Here you go. This is a sort of promotional comic featuring all the major image creators and profiles, and Keith had his, except no picture, and he talks about what he likes and you know the stuff that he's reading, and you know he cites Alex Toth as an influence, and it's true. You could see it in some of his work. Check out the second episode. We go over it. He's from Queens, hometown of New Jersey. He and by the way, the 5 years later run, it was so different from the Legion of Superheroes that came before it. Just to put it into context, it was a vibrant superhero poppy teen thing, and he turned it into pretty much a Terry and the Pirates super layered adult gray drama. And it was super sophisticated for its time. It still holds up, and it's still very polarizing. I still know fans who actively do not like that era, and but I also know people who would die for it. And so what we have here for Image Comics, he would create Trencher. That's his creator-owned character. It's the first time he wrote for himself. He didn't hire a scripter to help him out with the dialogue. He was writing dialogue and for himself. So he was penciling, inking, and writing for the first time. It's like he just said, screw it, I'm leaving the majors and I'm going to join these guys. At the time, as most of you might know, Image Comics were made up of ex-Marvel superstars who went off and did their own thing. And those books dominated the field. They were record breakers. They sold a lot. And so Keith was part of the second or third wave of image creators or of mainstream creators who were swayed by the image success and the freedom, really, especially the creative freedom. So if you could deliver a book, you could. You were invited. From what I hear, a lot of people were invited, and a lot of people turned them down because they were still seen. Image was still seen as a sort of gamble on your career, and with the possibility of being blackballed by the majors for leaving. Now, this is an ad right here that I want to feature because I don't believe I haven't seen it anywhere else. It's only in this issue of Splitting Image #1, which is Don Simpson's Mad Magazine, not Brand X version of the Image roster. Funded by Rob Liefeld, I believe. I believe Rob Liefeld sought this out and commissioned Don to do this. But anyway, here it is. It's just a trencher kind of leaning on it. He's a repo man of this from hell. He collects souls that he's been told have been displaced, so he goes around and collects them by inducing violence on these crazy characters. Very Lobo-esque in that it's just a big burly dude kicking ass. So it's familiar territory, more or less. This Inside Image is a sort of in-house promotional tool, sort of like Marvel Age or the DC Direct pamphlets that I showed around a little bit. And here you have a black and white version of the first issue, the front cover, which looks it looks very different in black and white. I mean, you can kind of tell what that is. It's this image, but it's just it's so chaotic. I love it. Colors by Laverne Kindzierski, who would later become one of his writers as well. Anyway, we have a brief interview with him with some cool original or good black and white art for the upcoming Trencher. And that's all we get. And then a few other, I want to compare a couple of the ads. This one appeared in Brigade #1. And so life sucks. Then you come back. Right. So we got that. And in this Wizard 21, we have the same thing, but in black and white. I kind of want to just see these side to side. So Laverne really, really brought it home. I mean, he made sense of this stuff. It's very, very cool, very interesting. And that's just imagine he's not penciling this stuff. He's just going straight with a nib and a marker and going for it, just making these lines. Even the image logo, even the logo himself. That's the silhouette of the main character, Trencher, as the T. It's clever, fun, playful stuff. Cool stuff. Before we get to the issue itself, though, there's more. There's a lot of promotional on this. They're really pushing it. Here's another one. Making the world safe for whatever. It's very 90s slacker generation, Gen X type humor, which Keith Giffen was known for. He was sort of Ambush Bug was his humor book at DC, and it was also sort of like it turned into high energy goofballness, and then it was more like a no, whatever, like everything sucks, everything's dumb, and then this is sort of carrying in that tradition. Again, interesting to see it in black and white, but also you have a preview for his other collaboration at Image. This one is for Jim Valentino's Shadowhawk property, where he was going to team up again with Alan Grant, where he would do his Lobo and Legion '89 collaborator, and he would just be drawing this. He would be drawing Shadowhawk for 3 issues. We'll be taking a look at that. But first, this is it. This is Trencher. I got this off the stands. I mean, I was buying tons of Image books as they were coming out back in 90 when it started, 92, 93. And I knew Giffen at that point. I was a fan. I liked his stuff. I wasn't familiar with the Legion stuff, but I was definitely a Justice League fan from early on. And so I like this stuff. I wasn't turned off by this. It definitely didn't look like anything Image was putting out at the time, and it definitely didn't look like anything else really. I mean, I was just sort of discovering independent work in dribs and drabs, but this seemed really unorthodox and odd and powerful and interesting. And the way I see it as a professional looking back, as an aspiring professional, and then before then when I was just a kid reading this stuff, this sort of set the template for what I thought comics could encompass, at least in a professional commercial setting, in which, hey, this got printed, there's success stories all around. This certainly is a success. This certainly is weird. Both things could exist. Like, to me, a commercial application, I didn't know what that was. So to me, this is like, okay, so this clearly made the grade. This is clearly a personal work in that it's very specific. It's very idiosyncratic, and it seemed to me like a success. Crazy characters, crazy designs. I believe he writes. He responds to letters eventually, but it's cool stuff. It's cool stuff. He's plugging Understanding Comics. He's so in other words, Keith. What I'm seeing now is that Keith was developing a personal voice. He already had a personal voice, but he was putting it on the page even more so. And that to me, I found fascinating. That to me is what makes it indie, I suppose. These are some of these Inside Image promo pieces, and you'll see the covers to number 2 in black and white. Very nice. I want to compare and contrast. Now, these comics these days, around this time, very shiny. So I'll try to get the glare out whenever applicable. We got number 3, fighting Rob Liefeld's Supreme character. And in this issue of Supreme, there's a promo, kind of random pinup, featuring Trencher about to engage with Supreme. Uh-oh. Keep this in mind, because this is a cool style. This is that Trencher style we're talking about. But Keith will return to Supreme several times. But for now, we have him in this issue. And in this preview. But let's take a look at these issues real quick, because, again, they are super interesting. How are they doing in the marketplace? So far, so good. You know, this came out when I think Shaman's Tears came out, Tribe came out, the Max was already out. So second wave, third wave kind of books. There's a book called Stupid, which kind of picked up where Don Simpson's Splitting Image left off, and it was just sort of like a parody book. I don't know if more than one issue came out of that, but anyway, I believe it was Todd McFarlane who was on record in a Wizard magazine talking about how some of these are weird. He doesn't know, but they're just going for it. See, Shaman's Tears, Alan Moore's return to mainstream comics via 1963. Interesting stuff. I should note this back editorial is Keith going out using Trencher as a stand-in for his opinions on bagged comics, which is like around this time. This is when you had like chrome hologram covers and bagged comics, and sometimes they would include posters or trading cards. And so it was a sort of marketing gimmick that took the industry by storm, and it got out of hand. And here Keith Giffen was sort of warning us in that, don't be stupid about this. This could only get worse. Unbag your comic, forget bags, frag the bag was the campaign that he started mounting because fragging was a term coined in his Lobo book. So now he's just like, frag the bag, forget this stuff, enjoy the comics, read the comics. It's about reading, it's about enjoying this art form. Forget the collectability. These aren't trading cards. The trading card industry went to crap. This is all about art. This is all about enjoying this cheap, quick entertainment. It's just entertainment. Like Keith was never pretentious about this stuff. He knew what he was doing, but he also knew its value and its power and its potential. And so Polybag comics were a blight to him. And he wasn't wrong in the way things were going. Anyway, that pinup just seemed like it was just this page. I don't believe it was reappropriated. I think it was just redrawn because that Supreme looks very different. So it's just the basic concept. It was redrawn, but it's just a cool fight, man. It just looks that's all I could say about it. It's cool. That's all it is. That's what Trencher is. That is his version of Image Comics. Like, oh, you want to talk about huge images and bombast and just fight, fight, fight? I'm gonna give this to you with the Superman analog Supreme. I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, this is a good middle ground between the underground and the mainstream. I find. I mean, great stuff. Again, how's it doing? How's it working in the marketplace? Well, he doesn't know yet. He doesn't know yet, but he'll find out soon enough because it gets canceled. And even up to the end, he still didn't know why exactly. A lot of books got canceled. I don't think this even came out, but a lot of books got axed. I mean, they cited maybe poor sales. And by poor sales, of course, it was numbers that people would kill for these days. But back then, if you were selling anything under 1 million, then it would be suspect. It would be on the chopping block. That's the classic Keith Giffen charge. He hasn't drawn that in a while. Not in 5 years later. And 5 years later, he would adopt the 9 panel grid, which is a Ditko staple by way of, well, it's a Watchman by way of Ditko staple. It's got a little Kirby in here, call back to his own Kirby influence. We haven't seen that in a while either. It's a great comic. This is the third issue. There's 4 issues, but by the time this got canceled, this had already been drawn. Digital lettering, early digital lettering. I mean, I know John Byrne was doing a version of that, and people had been doing that before, but this is a take on the death of Superman. Another huge gimmick that a seismic event in comics made the national news. It sold tons of copies, and so this is sort of a take on that. So you get the big robot version of Elvis in this instance. Elvis is the Superman stand-in. There's a robot. There's a human. Maybe that's a kid. That's supposed to be a kid. That's supposed to be like an Eradicator type. If you're familiar with the storyline, the Death of Superman story, it's fun stuff. He's just poking stuff mildly. It's just kind of goofy. Again, drawing the stuff, just random, just making a cool package. There's the Xmas Christmas Bites holiday blowout. You'll notice it's going to be put up by Blackball Comics, no longer Image. So this was already done, but Image said, we're not publishing you anymore. Sorry about that. But no hard feelings because he would be doing work for Rob Liefeld. And by work, I mean plotting, coming up with the plot and doing layouts for Chris Alexander to draw. The same way he would do for Steve Lido in Legion of Superheroes, Kevin Maguire in Justice League, Jason Pearson in the 5 years later run. That was his thing. That's what he would be known for. These are significant to me because I read them as a kid and I loved them. And he turned this book, which was a fairly typical extreme comic in that, like, it was just these cool looking characters going on missions and part of huge storylines. And here we slow down and we get personal in their private lives. Thanks to Keith, that's the direction he took them in, and it just becomes like a super violent, hyper violent gore fest while being intimate, while being personal, while giving these characters actual character. He was fleshing them out. Now the actual script was Eric Stevenson, now the head of Image Comics, but he was an early scripter for all these, a scripter for all these early extreme books. But these were all Keith Giffen plots. And this one, he just pits them against Supreme, which is like an angry version of Superman, pretty much. A Golden Age character come back to Earth and see its state and is trying to fix it. And he's just so angry he annihilates these undead government agents who just get reanimated every time they get hurt. And then this time they get more than hurt. They get completely annihilated. And I was reading this stuff and I was falling in love with it. It's um, again, Chris Alexander, the artist. I was into this. I was into it. I mean, it wasn't Rob Liefeld. I wish Rob was drawing this. It wasn't Keith. I really wish Keith was drawing this. But this was cool stuff. It was compelling stuff. And he only lasted 3 issues. Keith Giffen only lasted 3 issues. And the reason I'm showing you this is because many decades later, I would take it upon myself to tie up those loose ends when I was working on Bloodstrike for a series called Bloodstrike Brutalists. And I directly tie up these loose ends laid out here by Keith Giffen because I was such a fan and I just wanted those stories to be complete. And so these are they're important to me, but they also show Keith's involvement in Image Comics. But he was also doing pinups for this is Jerry Ordway and Al Gordon of 5 years later, inker, co-writer fame. They came over and they did their own book, Wildstar, and there's Keith's version of Wildstar in that trencher style. And I also have the Wildstar collection, an early image collection that also features the same pinup, but it's a little lighter. So you could see more of the line work. See that? Just the color, it's the same color. This is early digital coloring. So you don't know what you're going to get. Anyway, I have these inside image issues covering the Shadowhawk stuff. This is gonna we're nearing the end of his involvement with Image Comics. And this is for, again, Jim Valentino's Shadowhawk. Got some nice black and white work here. And what this was, Shadowhawk was one of the main titles at Image, but Images of Shadowhawk was sort of like a Legends of the Dark Knight for Shadowhawk, in that every 3 issues, or 4 or 5 or whatever, it would be a different creative team fleshing out the history of Shadowhawk and telling different stories in different styles. And they kicked off this thing with Keith Giffen. And only 3 issues exist. I believe Mark Teixeira was going to do a run. And but anyway, Trencher shows up. So he's not out of Image yet. Right. And by the way, I think Keith and Jim were going to do something called Galactic Legion or something, which was not a spoof, but just a cheeky take on Legion of Superheroes and Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the Marvel book that Jim was working on right before he joined Image. But anyway, these are the 3 issues. And in these previews, you see them in black and white. This cover is interesting. It must have been late because This doesn't look like a Giffen thing at all. It's probably just some staffer drawing this just to make the deadline of this promo, because the real version is a little bit more rendered. It's still just the concept is the same, but this is issues 2 and 3. Again, just more fun. Trencher beating the crap out of Shadowhawk, and Shadowhawk doing the same to him. It goes back and forth. That's a classic Giffen approach. We've discussed that at length here at the show, which is the shrouded lower face. Let's see, one more issue with color by Claudine Nee. But very much, I mean, it has that same trencher aesthetic. Super colorful. There's a cool shot. A Giffen drawing. Speaking of random Giffen drawings, um, this little hero illustrated preview shows a black and white version of this panel. Pretty neat. And then something else that's curious for this issue of the Shadowhawk Gallery. Here's a page not drawn by Giffen, but it features Trencher. It's not often that Trencher has been drawn by anybody else but Keith Giffen. So this is interesting. Okay, so where did Trencher go? Blackball, and that's where he started joining the ranks of Mr. Monster and company. This is again Hero Illustrated, which is a sort of it was a straight up competition to Wizard magazine. Bless Hero for trying. This is a nice, cool, full out poster, and this is the age of universes. Everyone was doing it in an effort to compete with Image Comics. Malibu put out Ultraverse, Bravura, Dark Horse put out Legend and World's Greatest Comics or Greatest Comics World or whatever. There was Milestone, there was Blackball, there was Axis. I mean, there was tons of stuff. Oh, you get another cool shot of the poster here. And just a little Giffen, just a tiny little Giffen examples. Pretty neat. But they had an article in Blackball. I don't believe they were mentioned too often in actual Wizard, but Hero got it. Hero got the gig, and there's a little. There you go. That's some Giffen. Giffen fighting this character created by Simon Bisley. I think that was Beasley's contribution to the line. The thing about Blackball is that they came and they went. They didn't last long. I don't think they lasted a year. They only put out a couple books. Maybe one more outside of this, but this is that Christmas special that was featured in the back ad of Trencher #4. More of the same. Just sort of sophomoric humor in the style of Lobo, with bits of Ambush Bug in there, and just the fact. Oh, there's another version of Trencher drawn by Dave Johnson, who had drawn the Super Patriot miniseries for Eric Larson. Oh, speaking of Eric Larson, Keith did stick around Image, just doing layouts for Freak Force for the entire run of 18 issues for artist Vic Bridges to draw over. So we will be touching upon that really soon. But here is Blackball Comics, which was supposed to be an anthology book featuring everyone's character, and this first issue was just Trencher fighting this dude. And then in the back you have a Kevin O'Neill story. But this is what we're talking about. It's just a fight comic. It's just fun. It's just fun looking. The concept is fun. It's not taking itself too seriously. It's just mocking the tropes and having fun while doing it. And he's drawing this quickly. He's drawing this just straight, no pencils, straight to pen. But like I mentioned, this doesn't pan out. does not pan out. But he draws it in the style. He retains the style and he keeps going with it. And he's now drawing the cover for Arena, which is a sort of interview magazine. Not really. I mean, it does interview a lot of people, but they're all very brief interviews, just 2 pages each, and it's pretty light stuff anyway. It just kind of updates on what are they doing and what are you doing now, what are you doing next, et cetera, et cetera. But it is cool. It's worth checking out just to get Geeth to talk is interesting. You're wondering why I have this previews, and it is because Blackball had a segment here where they talked about a crossover before they went out of business. See, that's the comic we just looked at, except that looks like yeah, that's the Bisley Trencher. So that you have Bisley drawing Trencher, you have Dave Johnson drawing Trencher, which is very much a Keith Giffen character. And so what you have here is just not quite a crossover, but only this story only exists in this issue of previews, January 1994, with the Batman Spawn cover. So it's only a few pages, but it's cool in that we get to see Keith draw Mr. Monster yet again. You'll recall that he drew this a few episodes ago, back in 1986, back in the post Jose Munoz controversy. So it's cool that they were all gonna cross over. And years later, they eventually did. They did in this Mr. Monster collection right here. Because even though the company went out of business, the creators had done work. Michael T. Gilbert, creator of Mr. Monster, or facilitator of this property at this moment. Here they are, in homage to Kirby, appropriately enough. There's Keith drawing his character, Michael T. Gilbert drawing his. There's that poster that we saw earlier. Trencher's barely in it. There's Michael T. Gilbert drawing Trencher for just this little 2-pager. He explains that how they came up with the concept of the crossover or this meeting. This is the last page of that crossover that never saw print. But what happened was Michael T. Gilbert dug this out for this edition of Mr. Monster stuff and had it lettered and colored. But it does include the Keith Giffen drawn stuff. This was the proposed team up that was going to happen in the 3rd issue of that Blackball comic. 2nd issue never came out, and yeah, because that's just where they went. It went nowhere. Look at that. That's some cool Keith. And that's the previous page that we just saw, which Michael T. Gilbert split in 2. And then we see that here. And it's cool stuff. And then I guess he's really not done with Image. I misspoke, but bear with me. Because this is not really quite a project. He just inked this page from Kirby. And this is thanks to Rob Liefeld, too. Rob Liefeld got a bunch of original art from the Kirby estate from Jack and Roz themselves and assembled a story around these random pages and made a comic. And he got everyone to ink segments of it. And this is the 2nd issue of that comic, Phantom Force, and Keith Giffen he's in the Image pool now, so he got called upon to ink this, and he was doing his Trencher thing on Kirby. I don't know if he actually inked over the penciled. I know some people made photocopies of the Kirby pencils to preserve the originals, but this has got to be like a full circle moment for Keith. It had to have been, because Jack was a huge influence on him. I mean, he the way he tells it, he was told by Marvel to draw like Kirby, but he had Kirby before that. He in his system, like he knew Kirby, he loved his work, he was a fan, so it came naturally to him, and so he has that sort of power and that sort of charge in his work already based on Kirby. So this is sort of a neat combination, a meeting of the minds. I gotta say, one more Trencher thing. This cool trading card. It's not bad. Not bad. Also in the style, the Trencher Mobile. This is a Star Wars character. He rarely did stuff for Star Wars, at least visually. Oh, there he is. A rare self-portrait. Look at that. Is that a weird mullet? No, that's smoke. No, that's a mullet. That's a ponytail? Strange. Mars Attacks. This is coming soon, but that's in this Trencher style. So he's getting ready for his Mars Attacks run. Well, not run, but his involvement in the project. Anyway, cool stuff. Dead Kid Adventures. This is Tom and Mary Beerbaum's Dead Kid Adventures, their self-published book, and Keith hooked him up with a cover. But this is post Legion of Superheroes, so they're about to stop working. When Keith left the book, Tom and Mary Beerbaum, the writing team, stayed behind for another, I want to say year, maybe a little bit more, with Stuart Immonen being the artist, and then they launched another book called Legionnaires with Chris Sprouse doing the poppier, colorful teenage clone versions of the Legion. And they worked a little bit for Rob Liefeld, I believe. Just a couple random things. And so they also did this. And they haven't really worked in comics since. But it's in that Trencher style. So this is perhaps, yeah, that's the last time Mary Beerbaum collaboration. It's not really a collaboration, but it is sort of nice to see them in one publication. For this Vision, Marvel Vision, we got a double page spread of this sort of this time slip category is every issue of Marvel Vision would have different versions of Marvel characters. I believe it was spearheaded by Jim Kruger, who would go on to script Earth X for Alex Ross. But anyway, it's pretty cool because you'd get to see atypical Marvel artists do random versions of characters. Again, I mentioned this before, but Captain America being this unfulfilled dream of Keith's to draw. It's kind of neat to see him do it in this sort of adjacent manner, you know? So yeah, that's really interesting in that Trencher style. Again, no pencil was used in this. Big Book of Urban Legends. He drew a page for this in that Trencher style. The Fart in the Dark. Yeah, I mean, this was suited for Keith. This is an anthology book. Uh, the Big Book of series and this Big Book of Urban Legends has a fart in the dark. This stuff I'm gonna have to show you. Let's see. Yes, I could show you this spread only. Everything else I would just have to blur out. But I suggest you get this because Keith wrote a bunch, and this has art by Kevin McGuire and Bart Sears, and it's all one big story that Keith wrote. It's one big epic, and it is filthy, and it's kind of hilarious in just how depraved this stuff is. This is drawn in this Trencher style, and I swear I really wish I could show you, like, even just I can't. I shouldn't. Seek it out. Seek it out. It's great. Great Gary Leach cover, reminiscent of Dave Stevens. But anyway, I promised you that I would talk about Freak Force. I know. It's good stuff. I love Savage Dragon. I love all the offshoots. It's a lot to take in. But this is pretty much Keith doing his Justice League thing on these characters, these random Eric Larson characters. Eric Larson assembled this team in the pages of Savage Dragon, gave it to Keith, and Keith would plot and lay it out. Yeah. Eric Larson himself would script it, but Keith would plot it, make the story up, and then give layouts to Vic Bridges. And the layouts happen to look like this. This is the first time I ever saw Keith Giffen layouts. And no offense to Vic Bridges, who's a wonderful ersatz burn, just sort of just aping burn circa 1985, right? But I mean, that's pretty cool, just throwing two huge bodies. But this has power. Look at that. Look at that. I mean, it's fucking great. I mean, these might be, they're not stick figures. You could even be, these kind of look final to me. And they're very reminiscent of Harvey Kurtzman. And see, this is that Keith Giffen trope of like an eyeball, nose, mouth, crop, very tight. But this is fantastic. I mean, get this issue just for this, really. Again, respectfully to everyone involved at Highbrow Studios. Fantastic stuff. Oh man, there's so much energy in this. And of course, this was treated, I'm sure, like throwaway. Like he never kept any of this. No one ever kept this stuff. I've never seen it out and about, especially back in the day. I don't think Kevin McGuire kept the Justice League thumbnails. I think what he would do is just little, he would do little mini comics from what I hear. The way Jam Demetes tells it, he would make little mini comics. They make the comic like that. Could you imagine just having a Justice League mini comic hand drawn by Keith Giffen? And it's just like, all right, next. I mean, that's sort of like what the attitude you have to have working in this field. Full Simonson piece, but we're here to talk about Giffen in the trencher style, granny goodness. Wonderful piece. She looks cool. She's giving it that menacing, regal, authoritative look. It's just so cool. He was born to draw new gods. Speaking of born to draw, he was also born to draw Prophet. Well, so was Stephen Platt, but poster insert by Keith Giffen. Look at that. That's right. Not in a trencher style. That is over. It's done. I mean, it's 99% done. And I'll be honest with you, I like that style, but it's not my favorite style. I have peers and I have other fans that I know of who love that style. I don't love it. I think it's cool and I love more the attempt that it represents, that he just went for it, that he changed things up, and that it was also as in this sort of in response to escaping the corporate setting that was frustrating his creative thrust, right? With Legion and Heckler and Lobo. It was just like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go all out and I'm just going to scribble this stuff in this chaotic way. Awesome. But I'm just glad it was just a phase. This is snapping back into that 5 years later style, which is just a more harmonious blend of his sensibilities. And it's for this character, Prophet. He's never looked like this before or since. He just kind of added, you wouldn't even know it's Prophet without this headband or without it telling you that it's Prophet in a Prophet comic. This comic itself is bonkers, but this poster is amazing. Sublime stuff. Oh man, just look at the Kirby crackle and the ink by Danny Miki, by the way. Danny Miki, extreme inker extraordinaire. We finally get to Mars Attacks. Now keep in mind, he was a fan of the Mars Attacks trading cards. So he had that influence when he was developing the Invasion storyline for DC Comics a few years prior. During Freak Force, there was an Invasion-esque storyline for a few, I think 2 to 3 issues. Definitely two, maybe up to three. He was also in charge of the Mars Attacks stuff over at Image when that was when they were crossing over with Image characters. And for here, he had the book to himself. Oh, he was the writer with artist Charles Adlard, who you might know from Walking Dead, the early Walking Dead issues, I believe. And what's interesting about Adlard is that he was influenced by Keith. He was one of the only Keith. He drew something for an extreme book. It might have been Team Youngblood or something like that, where he drew just like a straight up Keith Giffen. So I clocked Ted McKeever a couple episodes ago as being influenced by Keith, and now Charlie Adler. You don't see it that often, but when you see it, it's nice. It's a pleasant surprise. Keith drew the covers for his version, but then it's split in two. It's a flip book, and this is now written by Len Brown, but Keith is drawing it in that 5 years later style, but minus the 9 panel grid, of course. He's now just doing just straight up comics. I mean, he does have a sort of a couple of templates that he uses, like this specific long 6 panel grid, some sort of 8 panel grid sometimes, not here, but elsewhere you would see it. So they're kind of short stories. This is a cool version of this Mars Attacks #1, this blown up image. And keep in mind, let me just put that there. He did that in the trencher style. So he was already sort of on his way to this world, kind of shedding that. So this is just the same thing, just different. Great Ken Stacy cover. Stacy. Same issue. And this is an advertisement for #3. #2, we get, speaking of Kurtzman, a Kurtzman homage. Even his signature is even a play on the way Kurtzman used to sign his books. Charlie Adler. But on the flip side, and these are taken, I believe, from the cards or inspired by the cards, the old cards, which blew his mind as a kid. They were so violent and grotesque that it just really influenced him. And now this is the perspective of a dog. Yeah, that dog. A sad story, cool little done in one. But that's it. These issues continued, but his involvement didn't, at least visually. But for tops, he would do this cover of Zorro, inked by the mighty Joe Sinnott. And he really cleaned up his act for this one. I mean, do you think he's going to give him Trencher to ink? Although that would have been interesting too. But this is a pretty solid composition, and it's classically drawn. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's about it for. It's not it for tops, but what we have here now is a Mars ad that didn't see print anywhere but here. It's not a cover. It's not anything. It looks like it's cover ready. And what we have here, and by the way, that's just interesting because it's in that style. It's that, to not keep saying 5 years later. Let's call it pure Giffen, perfect Giffen, pure Giffen. It's pure Giffen, right? And this right here is pure Giffen. It's a black and white cover for Victory. Victory being a super crossover for all the Jack Kirby properties that Topps was in charge of. Now, they launched a bunch of books earlier in the year or in the previous year, and by their own admission, by editorial's own admission, the sales were great, and then they would keep dropping, and that's just sort of a typical trajectory in publishing. The numbers get cut in half and half, and then another half, and then in this time, this is the post boom. We're dealing with the fallout now. All those companies that I was talking about, all those universes, they're not doing as great as they expected. They might have hit big at the very beginning, but no one really was immune to this bubble burst. And so by the time this came out, this was story wise, this was a natural culmination of all the stuff that Topps was putting out, and Keith Giffen was hired to be the artist. It makes sense. He has a pretty good history with understanding the visual language of Kirby and liking this stuff and treating it with its proper respect while giving it like its own modern polish, reminiscent of the 5 years later. So it's a layered story. It's combining a lot of different elements and introducing some new ones. There's a lot of characters, lots of different titles. This was slated to be a bunch of issues, but only this issue exists. It's very beautiful stuff. It's very sharp looking stuff. Ink by Jimmy Palmiotti. So he's a pretty complimentary inker when it comes to this stuff. Just wonderful, wonderful Keith Giffen designs by way of Kirby. I mean, talk about a natural style to just pick up on this stuff and take it. Now, again, apparently the sales weren't great. Now, I've heard that Keith perhaps saw the scope of the story, and here's an editorial explaining that scope and more character profiles. And Keith was probably scared off the project due to the amount of work that this would necessitate, right? So, having come off of something huge like the 5 years later project, this is probably not too appealing. However, Keith himself has said that he he saw the sales numbers and they were pathetic. No one was buying this. So even though they had drawn issues 2 and 3, by the times the sales figures for number one came out, he felt so terrible that he abandoned ship because he wasn't. His reasoning was that he wasn't gonna make a company have them pay for their failure. And but I mean by pay, I mean like monetarily. Like he didn't want to. He could move forward and put out a book and have them lose money by putting out a book, especially during this weird time in comics. But that's his reasoning. So was he scared off the project because of its potential scope? I don't think so. I'd rather believe maybe that's partly true, but if you were believe what Keith himself said, then yeah, he was just going to walk away. He was practical in that manner. So anyway, in this issue of Comics Interview, get to see some cool black and white Mars Attacks art, some of those great layouts that Charlie Adler would pick up on. See what I mean? Like these are just suggestions of placements and who's talking and who's walking and who's how do you show this stuff? Just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Cover sketches, and then great black and white versions of Victory, you know? Some more stuff that hadn't been published before. I mean, this might have been a cover or pinup or something, but here are some more layouts for Dave Johnson, who we talked about doing Super Patriot. This is for the follow up, the second Super Patriot miniseries. And so you see, even there, just the power that Keith brings to it. And then Dave did his thing. He just did it in his own way, you know. But this is just to feature the energy that even Keith's layouts have. They're not simplistic. There's a lot of detail in these. And it's just wonderful to see how an artist would reinterpret that. I love this Victory issue. It's fantastic. And the way it looks is just it's just so incredible. It's almost like he never skipped a beat with the 5 years later stuff and just applied it to actual Kirby characters and obscure Kirby characters as well, or like the independent stuff, the post New Gods stuff. Uh, truly, truly awesome. Now, in this issue of Comics Interview, you got a panel of number two. Never appeared anywhere else. Also, I believe it was supposed to be 5 issues, and I think there's a cover for number 5 that features Kirby as a god, as one of the characters, which Alan Moore would later on do in his own run on Supreme. There's that Mars Attack ad. But here in this Keith Giffen interview for the Jack Kirby Collector, which we saw in the first episode when we were going over his Defenders run, we see some pencils for Victory. So this is what was given to Jimmy Palmiotti to ink. Typically, when it's all shrouded in black, you mark the image with X's. Sometimes just a couple X's. This seems to be overboard. But what do I know? And this is very specific. So again, he's not skimping on the penciling. He's giving you everything you need. He's not giving you just loose shapes. This is also a cover, I think, for issue 3, which never came out. It did see print, however, in the back of Victory. So this was supposed to be 3. So again, they're soliciting number 3. Cover of 5 is out. I don't think he would walk away from this, because he had gone on to do huge complicated storylines as well, just really involved, not complicated, but involved storylines. So it wasn't about the work, it wasn't about the sweat equity. It was again, I suspect that the sales were just that bad. And it's unthinkable, but that just it happens to the best of them, you know. In this issue of Hero, you get a little bit of Giffen and talking about some of these characters. There that is. And then it has an interesting final word segment, which is usually they give these to creators to talk about stuff, and here he talks about how he could go on and be negative about stuff, and which he's known for. So if that's what you're expecting, you came to the wrong place, because he's actually going to praise people and things he likes, and he does that for Howard Chaykin and Colleen Duran, who also was another young creator who he got mixed in with the Legion. He got her to work for the Legion and stuff. Again, keeping to his word that he cultivates young talent. He works with them. And this is interesting, because right here he talks about, other creators. He's like, I'm running out of room, but he just talks about his time with these creators, and it's just really, it's a positive note. I gotta say, you should seek it out. It's worth your time. Hero number 13. It's just a rare. I mean, we have seen interviews with him where he's enthusiastic, optimistic, and then it takes a turn into just a more a little cynical, just a little blunt, a little defensive at times. And so it's refreshing and unexpected to see him actually just support people, especially in the face of low sales, gimmicks taken over, stores being hurt because of those gimmicks, or misordering books. It's just it's refreshing to see. Oh, one more trading card featuring that ad. So maybe it was done for this card specifically, and it was repurposed as an ad, but it never saw print as a cover, as an official cover. This issue of Comic Scene has a Keith Giffen interview. Now, this was the premier comics magazine of the mainstream. At this time, Wizard was the popular direct sales comic book store magazine, but this was still going pretty strong. Issue 44, it was still, in the mainstream. You would find these at bookstores nationwide. So this is just a neat retrospective on Keith. Rare picture of him rocking those cool shades. I had shades like that, I think, in 10th grade. Amazing. See, we're connected. Me and Keith are connected. You know what I mean? What he discusses here is a lot of things. how poorly Heckler did. I mean, he's blunt about that stuff, you know? It just, he knew it, he just didn't care. He would just, he cut his teeth on Justice League. Lobo's a huge hit, even though that was supposed to be sort of a criticism of comic books and violence. And of course, it became the flagship book on that sort of material. And so this is interesting, but it's also, it came out back to back with this comic culture newspaper. Not many issues of this exist. A cool John K. Snyder drawing of Grendel, of Eppie Thatcher Grendel. It's got a good interview with Matt here, creator Matt Wagner, but it's also got, a solid interview with Keith. And in this, he's just, I don't know, he's back to old Keith. He's just being not negative, but he's just being truthful about the industry and how it all sucks. And it's all like, he doesn't see it lasting more than a few years. Like I think he's gone on record as saying like comics stopped existing after the year 2000, and in the way he understood them, in the way that they're just cheap, affordable entertainment for everybody. Everybody could find something in comics that they could latch onto. So this is a cool interview. I suggest it. We're back to Image now. About working with Eric Larson. Eric Larson would say that Keith would come up with all sorts of lame excuses to be late. So all he had to do was do layouts and plots, but he would kind of drag his heels on that stuff. Whatever, he got the work done. Those books came out on time, but I'm sure the artist was waiting for those books. This, or waiting for those stories to come in so he could actually draw them. Writer Tom and Mary Beerbaum. So they are back. They are back. For some reason, I thought this was Robert Lauren Fleming, maybe because Robert Lauren Fleming wrote other stuff for Rob Liefeld. But no, this is a Tom and Beerbaum collaboration with the Giffens. Sorry, Giffen with the Beerbaums. It's a pretty cool done in one Dutch story. Dutch created by Chap Yap. Nightmare. That's what Robert Lauren Fleming wrote for Marat Michaels to draw. Now let's see. Something else about the working with Rob Liefeld. I believe Rob Liefeld was going to do the Futurians, which is a property by Dave Cockrum. And Rob drew one pinup, I believe, maybe a cover for a proposed project that he presented to Dave Cockrum. And part of the proposal was to have Keith Giffen involved, laying out, maybe even drawing. But Dave Cockrum was adamant in not having Keith work on it. He immediately pulled out. He really didn't want to work with Keith or go anywhere near Keith. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's a post 5 years later beef, but they seem to be work fine before. They've been in publications together, especially Legion issues. So I don't know what the deal was, but Rob mentioned that, which is too bad because that would have been great. That would have been awesome. So Keith was always available. He was open to work with people and work with stuff. So that's a could have thing. So the Victory thing didn't work out. The Futurians didn't work out. He was gonna maybe do something for 2099, Marvel 2099. That never happened. Nothing close to that happened. But could you imagine like a 2099 by Keith Giffen to the Marvel stuff? Any of those characters, that would have been dynamite. So he went to Valiant. He started doing layouts and scripting, actual writing, not just plotting, but writing for Magnus Robot Fighter. Let's see, and this is 1994, 1995, and 94. So these are interesting because the artist, going by Gray, he's a penciler, inker Mike DiCarlo. We know him from Legion and Omega Man. He's a old school collaborator of Keith's. This stuff is awesome looking. when I saw this, I was like, where's this guy been? This is like pre Frank Quietly. The colors are lush. Colors by Mike Tuchinard. They're hand colored in this way that, Valiant was known for, but these look a little bit more they just look warmer. They just look, maybe it's the paper they're printed on. It just really looks like just cool stuff. Again, it drops you in the middle of a story, Keith Giffen style. Like, I don't think you have to read Magnus numbers 1 through 54, really. I mean, he doesn't really ignore that stuff, but it just doesn't matter. You just have to pick up where he drops you off. And it's, again, the art is very it has weight to it. That's what I mean by Frank Quietly. Now, I don't know this character Gray too much. And by the way, we'll be talking about PunX pretty soon. This is an interview with Keith about PunX, which is a book that he will write and draw. And that'll be the last time he does that. Well, he's got one more thing after PunX, but we will get to that in a few minutes. PunX, it's its own thing, but I just wanted to show this because I love this art, but this is the level of involvement with these characters that Keith has at the moment. Second issue, also drawn by Gray, but now the colors are by Comic Color. And you could see that they are not the same as what we got before. It is very early digital coloring. It is not complementary to the art. It gives this world a different feel. It's all very slick and gross and grimy. It's just not attractive at all. No offense, but it just renders this stuff in this, oh man. I mean, it was work. It was work, and you're just figuring it out, and that's fine. And yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Keith wrote a bunch of these. These are not as common as you would think. It took me a while to get all of these. The story's fine, has a lot of promise up front, kind of peters out, but he actually drew this. He drew the final issue, drawn by Kevin Kobasic of Punisher fame. This had a bunch of artists, but Kevin brought it home. 9-panel grid, tying up loose ends. It looks like Jackson Geiss almost. Jackson was working for Valiant at this time. Anyway, that's a cool cover. I wish we would have gotten more Keith Giffen drawing Valiant characters. Maybe I would have read some of those comics. PunX. Here is an interview in Previews magazine, I believe. The person I got these from wouldn't divulge that information. So I'm suspecting that it's a Previews issue. I don't know which one. Otherwise, I would tell you. But it's him talking about PunX. Overstreet fan. Let's see. Talk about PunX. Interview about PunX. PUNX. Got some cool images here that might be for an ad. Now this ad, comics with balls, and they're all holding balls, play balls. But get it? Isn't it funny? Come on, Keith. He's trying. He's going for it. He doesn't care. He's trying to do something interesting. These are all original characters he created for Valiant. But I believe Valiant owns the rights to these, of course. The Valiant wasn't a creator-owned company. For Wizard, by the way, yeah, this was Overstreet fan. This is Wizard, the great Simon Bisley cover. And this is an ad, but really it's a comic book, but really it's an ad for PunX. And already you could tell that it's got that ambush bug, irreverence, breaking the fourth wall. Like, we know it's a comic, we know what's dumb about it, but we also know what's cool about it. And there's one of the flagship Valiant characters, Solar the Atom. the Atom Man or Living Atom or something. The red guy that looks like Cyclops. You know what I'm talking about. You haven't read Valiant comics either. Don't give me that. Well, I read PunX. I read Magnus, and those were decent. I've read some Ostrander Magnus. Those are pretty cool too. Punks with balls. Comics with balls. Punks. Great. Here's the issue. Here's number one. It's finally solicited. It's finally coming out. So says Wizard. And here it is. And it's a cool, weird cover. I didn't pick it up in real time because I never saw it. I just saw the ad in Wizard. I believe I got these at Rogers Time Machine. That's where I got the bulk of my collection, to be honest, especially in digging for older, obscure stuff. This looks fantastic. I love this era. This is still to me pure Giffen. This is him rocking his post Heckler style. Like this is just it's not Trencher, it's not trying to be Kirby, it's himself, and it's still very fourth wall breaking, weird characters, claustrophobic settings, great heroes, great villains. Again, this is what I mean by the ambush bug stuff. It's like we're gonna call out some styles from other people. Dali, Picasso, Manga, that kid who draws like McFarlane. I mean, it's just he's having fun. He's having fun. Are the sales good? We don't know yet, but who knows? See, this is an image that was drawn perhaps for a cover or a pinup. It's similar to the balls ad, but it's not that. It's a different image. And here it's been elongated, which is this damn 90s ish graphic design aesthetic that is just murder. It just kills me. It's just it's just it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it's funny to look at it now. It's difficult to read. It's difficult to reckon with it, the fact that it existed. But what are you going to do? That's a perfectly fine piece of art. Why elongate it? And it happens here too. While I'm on the subject, it happens here too. I mean, come on. This isn't as egregious, but good Lord, come on. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. There he goes. He's lovingly mocking Understanding Comics. If you'll recall that Trencher ad in the back of one of the issues, he's advertising this. So he's not making fun of it. He's just utilizing it in the story to explain the plot, to explain the different levels of grimaces, whether it be Kurtzman or Mignola or Liefeld. It's great. Great characters. Great callback to that awkward interview with Bart Sears in the back of the previous issue. Worth reading, by the way, but God, it's so odd. It's just that was the aesthetic back then, I guess. I mean, didn't have to be. All right. Yes. Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you so far. Issue 3. All right. Recap page. Great stuff. You could kind of tell that if you're reading the story, you could tell that he's losing steam. He's losing interest in his own concept. It's probably because the sales figures have come back and they're modest at best. They're probably not great. It's not a huge book. It's a very esoteric approach to new characters that just aren't sticking. It either sticks or it doesn't. You'd think this is an ad for something else, but this is part of the story. This is, again, he's spoofing on TNA, the TNA craze of the 90s, where it's all butts, 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 over sexualized women, doing that Julie Schwartz ambush bug thing. But this is the owner of Valiant, or president, whatever. See, again, another elongated figure of a perfectly fine, beautiful piece of art of Pete Giffen. How dare you, graphic designer? Who do you think you are? Punk ad. Well, actually, right here, yes, this is the balls, but cropped closer. Interesting, I suppose. And see, this is get Punk number 4, which never came out. It was canceled, but it was solicited. And you have that image that was elongated, but you have it here in its pure form. See how nice that is? When you don't mess with it, you don't have to put your thumbprint on it. And then this is that Magnus cover that he drew without that computerized sky that was slapped on this. This is a fine composition. Man, at least got someone to whatever. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Punks would come back in the form of manga punks, which had been in the works for a long time. He only wrote this, and hey, it's published in a Japanese tradition, which is to say backwards. And yeah, so this is the last we'll see of punks. He had no visual input in terms of actual applying application. In terms of actually applying a line, he did not draw a single thing here. But it's an interesting artifact, and it's the last we'll see of these characters. Despite, I don't know if he had any effort to revisit. I don't think so. But this is it. So we get 4 issues and a bunch of ads. We now revisit Wildstar, Al Gordon, and Jerry Ordway's baby. What's interesting about this one is that he draws him again, but in this pure Giffen style. Remember the previous style with in the trencher style? Yeah, that's not this. This is great. I mean, wait, hold on a second. Let's just really. I mean, goodness, it's fantastic. Kid Death. I think that's what it says on the cover. Kid Death and Fluffy Spring Break Special. And he drew this in that sort of punk style, which is the punk style is it is that pure Giffen. It has a more of a craggy line. It's not as smooth as the previous stuff, and you could tell in the way he renders jackets and hair and rubble. You know, it's sort of it's where he's going to be for a minute. You know, it's still very much Keith, but it is that style. And here he's drawing this character. So, you know, this is sort of a rarity. You know, you don't really see these in the bins. Now, let's see. This interview in Hero Illustrated, number 16, he talks about Legion. He talks about his time in Legion. And it's just, he talks about how not fun it was. Well, it says here, let's see. I came close to just walking off the book and saying to hell with this. It ain't worth that hassle. But I got stubborn then and decided that I was going to make this work, even if I had to ram it down their throat. So, yes, again, like I said in the last episode, it was a passion project. He walked off once midway through the run, and then he walked off again several issues later. But like he says here, if asked to do it again, he would, because Legion is just one of those books. So this is sort of a Legion article that where they tracked down a bunch of creators and they asked them about it, and he was upfront about that. He was very clear about that. He wasn't working at Marvel or DC at the time. He probably felt like he had to air that. He had to air that grievance. At the time, he was drawing Mike Danger. Mike Danger for Mickey Spillane's involvement in Techno Comics. This is him. This is the character, which is a spin off. Well, the hook of that story is that Mike Danger is stuck in the future. He's frozen. He wakes up in the future, and so we have this hard-boiled classic detective stuck in the future. So that's the promo art that we get for it. In this Comics Values Monthly, we have a bigger version of that. Just a big old version. It's complete, at least. It's not cut off, but it is covered by text. It's kind of cool that it's in blue. but this was part of the promotional push of this Techno Comics initiative. Now, part of that promotional push is something that is covered in the Comics Buyer's Guide. And you could see it here, or he drew this newspaper strip for 5 weeks. It was a promotional initiative on Techno Comics' part to have this strip of Mike Danger in the future run for a year before the actual comic came out. And if you'll notice, or if you remember, those actual comics came out. Frank Miller did one of the covers. Eduardo Barreto was the artist on it. It eventually came out. But for the prior year, Keith Giffen was drawing the strip. Now, he only lasted 5 weeks. He only did 5. Only 5 of these exist. They are impossible to find. They're in print, but there's a site that has one strip scanned. So you could see that. You could see this. You could see this one. And that's it. This is a late 94 for 5 consecutive weeks for Asbury Park Press in the Comics Sunday Funnies section. And so Keith Giffen bailed after 5 after 5 installments. I don't know why. He's never talked about this project. No one's talked about this project. This is a super obscure thing, despite it being a super mainstream, mega promotionally funded thing. You know, it's just, who knows about this stuff, right? Well, the artist who took over was Joe Staton, and Joe himself gave me his copies or doubles of the copies that he himself drew. And so this is what they look like. Next to the Far Side, next to Kathy, the Sunday Home News comics. So see, he took over. I think Keith did September and the first week of October. So Joe drew it like this. Inked by Mike Barrero. Written by Max Allen Collins. No one has copies of this stuff, not even photo stats, not even photocopies. As far as I know, these are the only things that exist, the Joe Staton ones. He has all of his copies. They've never been reprinted. They likely never will be. They were never mentioned in the comic books. In all of the Techno Comics, they only exist in those magazines and this Comics Buyer's Guide number 1107. 1107. You could see that same piece right here. That big promotional piece that we just saw in blue. It's cropped again, but not offensively so. Interesting stuff. It's just, Keith was just working, man. He was just working. He was working. He was recuperating from the business. He knew where it was going. It was nowhere that he liked. By this point, Wizard gave him a nice write-up, nice article where he was interviewed, going over all his highs and lows. You know, at this point, Justice League is not seen as a cool thing. Everyone is embarrassed of it. They all like the new version that Grant Morrison is pushing, which was just a kind of a basic main 7 superhero comic. It's good. It's fine if you like it. It's great. It is no Justice League International, and this became sort of the butt of a joke in a weird way until the nostalgic cycle kicked in and people started reappraising it. They're like, "Oh yeah, that was actually great." Not me. I always thought it was fantastic. It was always a huge influence. So cool. But now we have Keith re-entering the arena of Marvel Comics, of mainstream comics, by way of Lunatik. Remember him from The Defenders? Co-created by David Anthony Kraft. Now, Lobo was a 10th grade creation of Keith's, which he took to make Lunatik for The Defenders. However, he then took that concept to Omega Men, took back his concept, and created Lobo. He was originally called Lobo in 10th grade, went to Lunatic, back to Lobo. David Anthony Kraft was like, what the hell? I thought I co created it with you. Not so. But Lunatic remained a character in the Marvel Universe. And so it's kind of funny and fitting that Keith would come back to this. He drew this cover, he penciled it. Kevin Nolan inked this. That's the only time they've ever collaborated. Kevin Nolan has a great post on his blog from, I want to say 20 years ago at this point, that it can't be that long. Maybe, no, it can't be that long. Definitely over a decade, 15 years or so. Look it up. It's great. But you could see the pencils and you could see him, what he did to it. And the colors help, again, by Laverne Kandinsky. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, but again, these are flip books. Yeah, there he goes. Laverne is the script, co-plotter, colorist, and co-creator. So I guess it's because this lunatic doesn't look like the Defender's lunatic. So now there are two characters called Lunatic. Lunatic with a K, by the way. Anyway, the inks are by Charlie Adlard. And there's Beavis and Butthead. So again, we're getting funny nods to pop culture. The Silver Surfer shows up, tying it to the Marvel Universe. Bisley cover, one in paint, one in ink. So Keith is sticking around his posse essentially. He sticks close to his collaborators. Interesting stuff. But he's moving away from that pure Giffen. Like his line is getting choppier, and I know that's probably because of the inker Charlie Adlard, an artist in his own right. But he's shifting. Keith is shifting. And by the way, look at double cover by Steve Lytle. But this is the final segment of Lunatic. The story itself is basically just a fight scene, a layered fight scene. The Watcher shows up. It's fine stuff. But his time at Marvel isn't over. See this Fantastic Four cover that is shining? Well, number 400, there's a back ad with the Avengers. I think it's just an ad for the actual story that appeared, but it's just a bunch of Avengers statues but broken down. It looks like 5 years later gear where it's just battle damaged and worn. Around the same time, there are a couple of pieces out there, maybe 3 covers for a Captain America comic book, or maybe it's called Captain America Spotlight or Marvel Spotlight featuring Captain America. But Captain America Keith Giffen drew Captain America for all these covers, inked by Charlie Adlard. That's what this looks like. I think the signature's somewhere down here, but those never saw print. They just live in the original art market. And I don't know what the story behind those are, who was going to be the writer, if he was going to be drawing the interiors, but they exist. So he did manage to draw Captain America in somewhat of an official capacity. It just never saw print. Here we have him drawing Supreme, back to Supreme, not in the Trencher style, but more of his own naturalistic style. These colors, I gotta say, it's kind of like those the Magnus colors, somewhat the PunX colors. It's like we're entering a new era now of just digital coloring that is not always complementary to the artist. Now, these days, the colorist is basically the new inker. They could dominate, they could ruin, they could make an image. These days, it's the growing pain stage of digital coloring. It's just it's fine stuff. It's it's they're doing what they can. It works for some artists better than others, but since I'm so used to flat colors on Keith, I just tend to think that looks best on him, or maybe just a more modest application of all these flares and tricks and shininess. It's just, it's fine. The story itself is cool. Again, it is by the Beer Bombs. I swear this is their last collaboration. So, but it's cool. It's cool to see him revisit a calmer Supreme, not annihilating Bloodstrike. Okay, we got one more adult comic, Penthouse Max. I suggest you get this issue. Again, I can't show pretty much any of it, but I could show you this page. Again, Keith Giffen wrote the whole thing, but he drew this segment. I think Bart Sears and McGuire drew a couple segments. Um, and yeah, this is great stuff. Again, this is in that sort of punks era style. But really, I can't. I've shown you too much. You're gonna have to seek this out. It's fantastic stuff. There's also a segment here drawn in the Trencher style, and it is wild in its depiction of his collaborators. I can't even describe what he's doing, but it is mind blowing. I had no idea. I mean, I was cracking up when I discovered it that it even existed. Alan Moore, Tackle Supreme, famous, critically acclaimed Alan Moore, Tackle Supreme. Keith drew these four panels. And for an extreme crossover, awesome crossover. These are all Rob Liefeld properties, in case you were wondering. Alan Moore wrote this crossover, and in it, he would employ a bunch of different styles, harkening back to different types of comics. We would have Gil Kane draw a segment. He would mix new artists and old artists, and Keith Giffen was employed to do Harvey Kurtzman shtick, which is he did that for the Mars Attacks covers, and his layouts already have a Kurtzman-esque energy, so it makes sense. But now he's back at DC, and we're winding down because the final episode is really just his he's staking his claim in the big two in a major way. And there's no more going back and forth. He does a couple indie things, but not really. But after a few years away from the big two, we get some work. We get this pretty nice Lobo. He's never really drawn Lobo like this before. I mean, he drew that postcard, but that was a close up of an eyeball. That's pretty good. Inked by John Dell. It's not really a collaborator we know Keith to have. He draws an issue of New Gods, a fill-in issue. Again, with that fun coloring that we all had to. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, look at it. It does its job. Who cares? It's fine. It's Keith doing Kirby. Who doesn't love that? That's he's back. He's back. He's back to doing Kirby. It's almost like a full circle moment again. It's going to be a full circle moment every time he approaches Kirby, right? So, to wit, Thorion. He doesn't pencil this, but he writes it. And it's just interesting that he got to work with John Romita Jr. He's now becoming a writer. Now, he did that for Magnus, but he is not just plotting. He's not just doing layouts. He is scripting. He's putting words in characters' mouths. And this issue, by the way, is drawn in pencil. This is early pencil work, photostat. Technology would catch up and it would make the stuff look better. And this stuff looks great. It looks fine. I mean, it's John Romita Jr. It's powerful stuff. It's appropriate for this mashup of Thor and Orion. Back to the indies. Just two last indies. He did this cover, right? But again, 90s designers, man. Why, yes, we get two things of Giffen, but why break up this thing? I'd much rather see this image unmolested, because that's what you did. Whoever did this. It's a fine cover. It's a fine cover. It's a fine cover. Goat. This is a Christopher Priest vehicle. He was in charge of Quantum and Woody for Valiant. And Keith drew it. Keith drew it. And he was part of that Valiant team for a while. He didn't draw all of it, but he drew this first half. And yeah, it's fun stuff, especially if you're following the book at the time. It does have that sort of sharp funniness to it that Christopher Priest is known for. Great writer. This series was great. This was just like a weirdo one shot, you know? But we're back on DC. We're back. We're back. And we're just going to end it on this run of Fate, which is a book of Fate, which is something that he was writing along with Alan Grant. But he was actually drawing these issues. And they're in that post-punk style, right? Bill Reinhold inking. Bill Reinhold, you might know him from The Badger or The Punisher, Mike Barron. He has a very naturalistic, brushy style. He inked, I believe, Steve Ditko on Phantom 2040. Is that the book? But anyway, it's interesting to see him work on Keith Giffen. Look at that. He's still flirting with the form. He's not doing anything crazy. This is what we will examine next time, which is just his sort of locking into a very specific approach to layouts. I mean, there's no more experimentation. That is out the door. It's not it's not his concern. He just wasn't interested in that. And I get it. He just wants to have a specific rhythm to this stuff. Understandable. Great cover. Great moody cover. He hadn't been drawing these covers, but he drew this cover, so that's awesome. He drew these last two covers. Fantastic. This is the striking one. This is when every month, this is the one where for this month, every DC comic had a big headshot. But he didn't draw this one, though. He just drew the cover. So, but you got to have them all. You know what I mean? This one, I'm ending it with this because this is my new favorite Giffen comic. So I want to finish by talking about this particular issue, the last issue of the Book of Fate, which he actually drew. He plotted, he drew it, and he's, as you can see, he's employing the 3-panel grid that he did back in that Legion 91 issue, the Birth issue. He did it in that issue of Justice for the New Universe a couple episodes ago. It's really effective. It's right before it becomes super trendy to do this. We're talking about 98. Yeah, I mean this is this is 98, January 98. So he was doing this in 97. And what I love about this is that sure, he's been doing punks. He's been doing stories here and there. He was doing Lunatik. He was doing one shots, and as you could see, he was sort of developing into this kind of like a sharper, more angular sort of sketchier line that depends on the inker, depends on the theme, the type of story. But here it's sort of like he's like going back to his super claustrophobic post Munoz 5 years later type. And I mean, it's great. It's almost like a great send off to this style. And the reason why it works for me so well is because it's pretty much just this character, Fate, this version of Fate, and Lobo just going out to drink. I mean, shades of Victory, this sort of design, very Kirby esque. They just go to a bar. I mean, they get tattoos. It's a night out with the boys, right? And so every corner is jam packed with detail, from characters to architecture to just settings. Dark alleyways, just garbage, and then this is the thing: you get to see Alan Scott, Green Lantern, in this super dark, moody, designy fashion, which you don't see at all. You never see it up to this point or since. This is super special. This is what makes Giffen extraordinary. He makes these characters look in a way that you've never seen them before. And why don't they look like that since? It's really just his own. The color application is great. The inking is fantastic. The mark making is superb. He is just this is just a great package. Grant's script is great. It's just it's wrapping up the thing. I mean, you could just I mean that just that profile of Giffen drawing Lobo spitting out booze is so great. And by the way, we haven't seen too many early on we examined all his tropes, the vertical panels, the profile shots, the Dutch angles. You don't really see much of that anymore. Great city shot. I mean, just great sense of space and scope. They go to this bar, and that's where you see all the cameos, all the Legion 89, Ragman, Blue Beetle, just characters that he's worked on or had been sort of connected to. Heckler appearance. That is the last time he'll draw Heckler. That right there, that little profile. You got Doom Patrol, Doom Force characters. I believe that's Aztec. Is that a Mark Miller character? But it's very cool to see. It's very cool to witness in this final issue. I mean, look at this great Hawkman. He draws such a cool Hawkman. These colors really serve it. But Fate gets kicked out of this bar. These the weird non-angles perspective of the city. It just gives it that cool sense. It's like you could tell that he's either drunk or in another state of mind, or he's disoriented from being thrown out by a hawk person. And off he goes. This nice little Sin City type of negative shadow. Very cool looking stuff. Hasta la vista, buddies. Indeed. Please seek this out. The Book of Fate number 12. It is fantastic. I mean, as you just saw. But that's it for this episode. This is the penultimate episode. For the next time, we'll be taking a look at these books right here, which is the last leg of his career, of Keith Giffen's career. Now, he'll be back to DC. He'll be doing a lot of Marvel work, mostly just as a penciler for huge projects and huge relaunches and nothing long stretching. There's no huge long running series, but he does like maybe 4 issues here, 5 issues there. By his own admission, he just wanted to be plugged in to fix things or help out in certain deadlines or stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that. We are going to be going over every piece of art that he drew. And every project we're going to be going into detail and to see how it evolved. And it eventually, like I said, he locks into a layout style, but he also locks into a visual language as well. He becomes like his own for a stretch. And then really it's going to be up to the inkers to really make it, set it apart. I mean, it is super interesting. And the thing is, by and large, he never rested on his superstardom, especially early on. He was always looking for work. I think he said that he had only asked for work specifically 3 times in his career. So all the stuff that we've been looking at for the past 4 episodes and now this 5th one, he has sought this out. He's been ambitious. He's been hustling. He had been like wanting to work and be on the stands. He's admitted this. He's admitted to the competitiveness of the stands. Like he wanted to have a presence. So if it meant drawing a fill-in for Supreme or launching a Mars Attacks or working on Kirby characters to any degree, he's going to do it. He's not above it. He's not a diva. He's not a superstar in a way that, how this work is beneath me. No, none of it. No, he was game for it all. If you were game and you had a cool project and you wanted him to be involved, he would be willing to do it. And he was an idea person. I mean, J.M. DeMatteis could attest to that, where he was just an idea machine, just throwing stuff out. And if it didn't work, he didn't have an ego about it. He would just create something else. And so that's how he treated his career. That's how he just went on from project to project. And that's how we got so many comics to look at. So So thank you again for showing up and hanging out with me, looking at these awesome comics. Join me next time for the last time so we could really bring this home and really catch the full breadth of Keith Giffen's work. And yeah, I'm excited for this one. And thanks again, and see you next time.
Fiffe File.